This is what happens when dreams don't come true, when the world is flung and flipped off its keel and the oars are lost to the current and the water is too pin-prickly to swim and your muscles seize and you sink like a rock and no one can hear you scream because they too have become so disenchanted that they've cut themselves off, deafening themselves, protecting themselves from the real world, and they go on long enough until they forget how to be human. This was true when I was growing up, but I was young enough and naive enough to believe that things would change, to believe that my buying power would improve and that would make all the difference. I hadn't read The Great Gatsby at that point. It seemed obvious that things would get better. That's what all these Hollywood stories taught us, and I bought into it. Now we're all just a little bit older and a little bit colder, still writing off others like we always have, and lack the integrity to communicate even when it's the right thing to do, even when it's the hardest thing you can bring yourself to do. Like maybe reach out when something really big happens, like when Dana gasses up his low expectations and steams full throttle, bow pointed toward the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and he pushes forward until the gas tank's dry, at which point he puts a bullet through his skull, and the Canadian Mounties find him less than a week later, drifting 12 miles off the coast of Nova Scotia. Maybe that's something I shouldn't have to find out about through a fucking Google alert 10 months later. Maybe those are details I shouldn't have to learn by filing a Freedom of Information request with the Cumberland County Sheriff, because everyone is too spineless and thoughtless to talk about it. Suicide is a dirty word when you're living in paradise. Out of sight, out of mind is the status quo. This is what happens when dreams don't come true. The dreams of a generation that were told they were special, not realizing that their specialness was temporary, until the next generation came, and they were special too, and we were just old. But passing on the idea from one generation to the next, as if it'll one day actually make some future generation special. For really real special, not that fake sort of special like we were. Wouldn't that be something? But what am I complaining for? I'm screaming into deaf ears, like the ears of those cowards back in 2013 that drove me to nearly want to throw myself off the GW. But I didn't have the balls, so instead I went back to school to be measured in letter grade. It was a self-improvement step that somehow made me feel like a failure, like I was giving up on something. Or the eyes of my roommates back in 2003 that drove me to abandon my first apartment, destroy my credit, and deplete my assets, almost forcing me to move back to Maine with my tail between my legs, proving everyone right that I couldn't make it in the big city. But I weighed the pros and cons and decided I'd rather die than leave New York. This is what happens when dreams don't come true. Your child drops dead because his dentist forgets to sterilize the inside of his mouth before pulling a wisdom tooth. Accidents happen in the Western world, even when we think we've got it licked. But the people you love will go away, and you'll watch their life fade from their blackened bodies beat to shit because they didn't take care of themselves in their younger years, and you regret ever loving them to begin with, or ever connecting with them at all. And to stay sane, you have to cut yourself off from everyone and everything that reminds you of them, every restaurant, museum, film that makes your heart ache and your eyes well up. The moment they're gone, you know your life will never be the same. I tell you, it will never be the same, because you lost someone that kept that spark lit, who kept life in balance and on that desperately needed even keel. And so I try to communicate and create and explain that creation makes all this shit bearable and that it shouldn't always be about the money. Maybe create art because you have something to say. Don't worry about the paycheck. It'll come some other day. But my song is lost to the noise. No one cares about the art or the craft as long as they've got their selfie with the latest digital camera taken from the downtown heliport. So their friends know that they get paid to work with the latest gear. We live in a world of broken dreams, long ripped apart at the seam. I'm screaming into deaf ears, the ears of people who can't even take a compliment from me, because everyone's got an angle, so I must too. But the truth is, I don't have an angle. I just want to talk to you about writing because I hear you're a poet too. But then I guess that makes me the enemy, because there's not enough room for the both of us, even though we've got something totally different to say. Fiat money is finite and can only go one way. What's it matter anyway? Deaf ears. The deaf ears of those who will never read my books, never watch my films, never ask why I keep a penny minted in 1987 on my home desk and my work desk. The deaf ears of those lost in their own lives and happiness and misery. The ears of a crush from yesteryear who posts a picture of her newborn baby and you realize Mother Nature is a fucking bitch. The ears of everyone who thinks me a traitor for moving to New York with a vision for my future, with the idea of living in all these grand neighborhoods with their stores and restaurants high above the Central Park pine oaks, only to wind up in a studio right around the corner from where Eric Garner got choked. But somehow the city still got me hooked. Brick and mortar has never looked as good as it does in New York. But that's not to say there isn't a downside to this thing, or that there isn't always a feeling of safety some evenings. Not physical safety, that getting jacked sort of safety. but knowing your local bodega won't try to take advantage of you if they sense you're a little out of it, off your game. But it's still better than that other thing, living among everyone else, dealing with the reality that their dreams haven't come true, refusing to realize that if we work together, all our dreams could come true, but we're all too selfish and deaf to give a fuck anymore, not just about others, but about ourselves too. So we stop being sensible, open-minded, and ripe with vision. Instead, we vote like we drive, casting ballots with emotion and anger, oblivious to the consequences. We elect for misery, because that's what we always do.